So you should hear something. Okay, Ron.
Okay, so welcome everyone. We are at our interim work session for November 25th, 2024, where we are starting the meeting at 4:02. If we can go ahead and have roll call when I say your name, if you could just say present, Leslie,
Present.
Carissa,
Present.
Dan,
Present.
Will,
Present.
and I'm present. So we have that. And now if I could have a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the November 25th, 2024 work session agenda as presented.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Okay, Brian took care of that. Go ahead and start us off.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I'm going to click over to the slideshow now. Again, you have a link. You can certainly follow along. Um, the way it's going to go tonight, I'm going to try to leave as much time as possible. I don't know if it's best. Please always, this is conversational. If I say something you want to talk about as I'm going, just interrupt me, put your hand up. I will tell you I'm terrible at monitoring the Zoom chat. So that's probably not the best place if you want my attention kind of right away. But I also planning on leaving a significant or at least a chunk of time at the end for you to formulate questions. And that should become more and more clear. And just will one or all of you give me a quick little thumbs up if you are seeing a kind of white slide right now? Perfect. I am a little out of practice on the Zoom, but I'll get back. So these work sessions, the goal is really for you all to feel up to date. That's really the goal, is for you to feel up to date on all the progress of the bond, especially as it relates to decisions that we're asking you to make, but certainly on all aspects of the bond. I reread the ballot title today, and transparency was something that we listed in there quite often, and I think that definitely aligns with our values. And I think I touched on this, but two pieces is like really understanding what are those upcoming decisions we're asking the board to make, and how can we answer your questions in a level that's sufficient for you to be able to make those decisions. So that's the goal of all of these interim work sessions. And we'll hopefully meet that goal. And if it's not working for you, again, just please reach out to me and let me know. I'm just going to do a few minutes of kind of level setting or grounding. Hopefully this document's becoming more and more familiar to you. It's something our team tries to work on. I won't ask you to read it. It's a little bit blurry on my end. Not sure if it is on yours, but two key pieces of our strategic plan, I think, that are really applicable here. And remembering that this wasn't something we just dreamt up. This was a pretty engaged community process with an oversight committee and all those things. And so I guess I'll start with aligning our resources. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but just kind of to paraphrase, right? Aligning our resources. Our bank's school district resources are responsibly and transparently maintained and maximized, and clearly aligned to achieve the strategic plan goals. And then the other one, enriching our facilities, seems pretty applicable here. The Bank School District community will maintain and improve all facilities to provide innovative teaching and learning and working environments that enrich the student experience, safe and healthy environments, inclusive and accessible spaces, and a resource and source of pride for our community. So one thing I thought about was just, my gosh, we're firing information at you. I really do. And you'll see this in a slide coming up. I think there's about 100 hours a week by different people, not one person, but I think an estimate of 100 hours a week being put on this right now. I don't think that's an exaggeration from the number of people working on it. It's probably not precise, but somewhere in the ballpark of it, there's a ton of work being done and just a ton of stuff coming at you. For the sense of time, I'm only going to give you 30 seconds for this next activity, but will you just pick a student that you want to think about? This can be a hypothetical student. You can make them up. It can be a real life student. It can be one of your own kids. It can be a former student. It can be anything. The only rule is you care about them and you can envision what you want their experience in high school to look like, or if they're already out of school, what you wish their experience would have looked like. So I'm just going to hit pause on my voice for about 20 more seconds. And 20 seconds is a long time when I'm not talking, but you got 5 more. The second important lesson is how I just got really carried away with ChatGPT and its image generation. But what I'm trying to get at with this picture, and we're not going to share this out for time just yet. We'll have some time at the end if you want to. But just think to yourself, for that kid, and I always think it's important to ground yourself in what we're calling that focal student. What do you envision for them? And if they've already graduated, you're a student, pretend they're going back to school, or what do you wish they would have had? But just kind of think about it, and we can hang on to that. And if you want to reference that later, but most importantly, it's how you internalize. And since I'm the one that's in control of the Zoom, I get to show you a picture of my kid. That's me and my son, Gavin. This was yesterday up on Mount Hood. And he's the one on the left. I'm the one on the right. The only time all day he was actually behind me, it turns out. But the thing, what I think about it with him is it's just unique in our family. I spend most of my time at the Bank School District. Gavin, he goes to school at Hillsborough High School, which I actually worked there a long time ago. And they had bond work done in between when I worked there and he went. And it's just interesting to see what they were able to do and what they weren't able to do. And the other member of my family that didn't get to come on this trip, she was at some teacher training up in Seattle, my wife. She gets to work at Mountainside High School, which was a big budget high school, brand new, start from scratch, and what she and her students get to experience. So I think about that a lot. And I hope you have a similar context as we go through the next whatever amount of time it's going to take us today and throughout this project. So one thing I really want to make sure, though, I firmly believe that this project is our students' project. It's their money, it's their school, and above all else, it's certainly not my money or my school. And I never want to be seen or that you feel like I'm withholding any information, or just that inadvertently you don't have something that you're wondering about. So I just wanted to remind you all, how can you stay updated? We looked last time at that giant 11.5 by 17 bond progress document. And I'm doing the best I can to keep that updated. So you're always welcome to click back into that. If that's one that's helpful to you, you'd star it on your Google Drive. You'd remember it's linked here. However, you'd email me. I can get you the link whenever you want. But I try to update that every couple of days and change the color on where we're at. It's a rough document. It's difficult to maintain, but it may be helpful. I send out the minutes whenever I get them. I send them to you. I think I owe you one that I got yesterday, but you'll get some minutes in email. I find those hard to follow because you weren't there, but that's an option for you. These work sessions, we have our board one-on-one scheduled. That's another good time if you could even send me questions ahead of time. We have our work sessions and our regular meetings. And then also, I try to end every email with this, but it is very authentic. I do mean it. If there's ever anything you just want to talk about, just give me a call, and we'll find a time that we're both available. But one thing I've been talking to the team about, and Ron and Dan, when they were helping me plan for this meeting, and some other options we had to talk, we are going to try to get and do more than try. We're going to have our board questions be in writing so that we can respond in writing. And that's not like it must be in writing official need. The reason for that is I'm not doing a good job of conveying information in a way that's like sufficient enough. I try to kind of summarize things to you all, but I'm finding it needs to be in a level of detail that's more than just me kind of remembering what had just happened. So I have a process I'll show you later, but it does not need to be complicated. We will review board questions once a week at our meetings, and we'll assign that question to a particular team member. They'll answer it in writing, but then also when Brick and Cornerstone and PNC, when they come to talk to you all, those questions will be in the answers to those questions will be in their presentations. But something I do want you to ponder, something I've really, really been struggling with, is what I mentioned a few minutes ago. There's just so much of a volume of work happening. I'm struggling to get that sufficiency of detail for you all, right? Because I can't give you the 100 hours or 50 hours or whatever it is. So I'm just wondering, and Casey brought this up, Casey Cunningham today, if you remember, he's the project manager for construction itself. And he's like, and he did not mean this in a negative way, but he's like, it's clear that they don't trust our work right now. And he's like, we've got to be able to find a way so that an answer becomes like kind of validated from them. And so not trust like you don't like them or you think they're unqualified or underqualified, but it doesn't seem that that's enough to just repeat what they have said back to you. You want a lot of that background information, and that's not bad. There's no judgment behind that. It's just trying to find ways to get that to you in an efficient manner that keeps us moving forward. And we'll talk about like kind of timelines of the project and why there is going to be a bit of a sense of urgency here. Little bit larger scale questions that these are ones today we talked about. I was with Brick and Cornerstone today that we really do know that they and I haven't gotten to you very clear answers of. And the first one is like when they're doing this long range master plan for us, demonstrating what parts of that master plan are going to be done with the current bond money. Like when we've shown you the plan, it's like, oh, that is awesome. Look at all that stuff. But you know that not everything can happen right then. But we realized, and through good feedback, and by the way, the bond oversight committee said the exact same thing. They're like, we can't tell what's happening when all the buildings are orange. So Mark understands that, and he's working on a way to get that clearly demonstrated. And then another tricky one is like, what are the questions that y'all come up with and that I have are actually more appropriate maybe or more aligned to the work of the actual design of this high school building. And that design process, which you'll see in a minute on the calendar, is currently slated January 25 to January 26. Now, like is Ron, I thought, Ron, you really helped me think about this. I can't remember if that was this morning or last week when we talked, but a key piece of that decision, of course, is the administrative building, which influences what the design of the high school is going to look like. So there's no way to only do master planning without looking at design. So it's totally a fuzzy gray area, that second question, but it is one we're trying to wrestle with to say, great question, but that maybe is better answered in April when we have more information. So big picture, those are two big things that the team is really trying to ponder over right now, in addition to the minutia of just trying to move us forward. All right, Carissa, here's the next two slides are I'm going to try. And it was already in there before you emailed me, so don't worry, you didn't cause any extra work. I think that's a great question. And I don't remember exactly how you put it, but if I may paraphrase, what the heck are we actually trying to accomplish? So that we know if the plans you're seeing are actually leading us to what we're trying to accomplish. Okay. This is almost identical to what the bond oversight committee was given. What you'll see on the left-hand side, when we say requirements, that is what we've told the architects, BNC Construction, and Cornerstone. They absolutely must deliver in what they believe they can deliver within the scope of our budget. So I am going to walk through them a little bit, but thank you for the clapping. But that might have been a little early. Might have been a quick clap.
That was sorry, I was trying to screenshot.
Oh man. Dude, I shouldn't have called it out.
My applause, but it was inappropriately placed. So
okay.
my bad.
Probably deserved it. So what we have to do is replace a majority of the learning space at the high school. We did actually say in a 2-story building. I don't know what would happen if we said, hey, by the way, we're going to replace the majority of the learning space and it's a 1-story building. I don't know how critical that is, but definitely of replacing the majority of learning space at the high school. We said we need to improve campus-wide circulation and traffic flow. We said we need to remodel our high school locker rooms to modernize and comply with Title IX requirements. We said we need to add an auxiliary gym, and that was clear in a little more language. It's not an additional gym, it's a replacement. We need to address safety and security, and we need to address the elementary school HVAC and roof repair. That's what we've said we absolutely must do. There's a wish list that we've also given them. They're using a little more technical term, at least I believe it's a more technical term. They're calling them alternates, which would be like line items of the budget. So they're going to get, these are ones, the wish list, the way I think about it. This is certainly not all the needs we have for facilities around our campus. Not even close. But they're the ones that we're asking them to get us pricing on, so that if additional funds do become available, they are these could become funded. One is a maintenance fund. Frankly, we don't have money in our budget, nor does the state of Oregon provide money in the budget to upkeep buildings, and we are constantly chasing, and we're not keeping up with our current needs. The middle school and roof and HVAC aren't too far behind the elementary school in needing upgrades and repairs. Without going into the details, some of you are more aware of this than others, but Banks Creek behind the football field, it needs significant repairs. Tried to go after grant money, not having a lot of success with it, but that needs to be improved. Enhanced safety and security, you'll learn in about a week, just a little bit of a inside baseball, I guess. Safety and security is coming up as number one on our outreach sessions, our community input sessions. And we won't be able to do everything we need anyway. They did the security audit for us and are getting us a prioritized list. We won't be able to knock off 1 through 20 on the list, but we'll get 1 or 2 on the left-hand side. And then we hope maybe we can get updated security cameras, maybe weapons detection. You've probably seen this a lot in the news lately. Portable panic buttons, and modern safety software. I could go into more detail, hopefully, for what we need to talk about today. You get the gist. Our high school weight room, and friends, this really isn't to like give us a better weight room, like from a athletics point of view. This is like our weight room kind of currently shakes and sometimes plaster falls down below it. It's like improving the weight room kind of physically, not just buying brand new weights. CT shop upgrades, cafeteria stage refresh, and the elementary school parking lot. It's just the elementary parking lot's in pretty rough shape. So Carissa, that's, and you have, I should have said this when you were saying about screenshotting, you should have this entire presentation. So you got it. You're always allowed to screenshot, of course, but you should have it. Let's go into a little more detail, and I'm gonna take a breath and see if there's anything you want to talk about before we move too much forward. Let's just hone into the high school part now. Okay. A summary of what's happening is, including for our current bond, replacing the space so that we do not lose any classroom space. 2, that means you get 15 new classrooms. One of them is the computer lab FAD space. I don't know if you're familiar with Ms. Pasador's program, but making a room more aligned to her program needs. But that's really it for CTE in the requirements. That's kind of why I want to put that out there. This is very much a paraphrase, but the district office would get a new location or improved, right? That, of course, depends on the administrative center, but also new high school administration and counseling, new library and media center. And this is where, and all the other stuff you need to have a school. I'm not sure if I've said it in this presentation. We are really asking PNC if we can start gym and cafeteria HVAC now. Our boiler has again failed for the second time this year, and the rooftop units of the gym have broke, for lack of a better word. So we're asking them if they can start some of that HVAC work on the buildings that aren't going away sooner than later.
So we're talking to be middle school and high school, or sorry, middle and elementary.
No, I'm sorry, Krista, thank you for that clarification. What I'm talking about right now is not the HVAC we were talking about before, but since the new building's going to need HVAC anyway, we're asking if we can do the parts for the gym and cafeteria soon, but still be in line with the construction. Like, we don't want to waste any money, but
Okay.
is it possible to phase that in?
Yeah.
Because the boiler, it just keeps breaking,
Okay.
and causing damage. And anyway, so there's a list here, and I am going to go ahead and click on this, but I'm not going to go through much of it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but of course, you can look at it all you like. Let me hit the zoom button. Okay. So this first page, I think, is the most important for where we're at right now. Is the area in purple is what's believed that can be, for what we can afford, the best area to demolish, utilizing some of that space to create the new 2-story building, and then leaving area for future expansion if you needed to replace a wing. And we'll look at a better way to see that later. Okay, but they're like, okay, if we're going to get rid of all this, what do we have to replace it with? Like, what needs to go in there? And I was pretty clear with them that, like, we're not happy with our current school. So don't just assume we have to replace everything. But that was the starting point. They interviewed me, admin team. They interviewed all of the teachers, specific meetings with special ed, etc. They came up with 48,000 square feet. When they priced it out, that to all of their calculations came significantly over budget. So they went through and trimmed down and aligned a budget, came up with all of the, and you're not going to be able to read this. This is only meant to be illustrative. All these square footages, and I'm just scrolling through just so you can see all that goes into it, to land on about 43,000 square feet, which they're like, okay, if we can keep it, it's a more precise number. I think it's 42,869. If we can keep it with that, we know we can pay for it. And that's using that $740 per square foot. We've looked at what recently completed high schools have gone for, and that I could give you examples where you would say that number's too low. I give you examples where you say that number's too high. So it seems pretty appropriate to be using it at this phase. Now I'm going to go back to my slideshow for a minute and just tell you what we're going to be doing with this. That goal was landing on the area to multiply it by the $740 per square foot. That was the purpose right now of going to that activity. I'll tell you, district staff, including myself, don't love some of the rows on that spreadsheet. We don't like that they're including some things. We don't like some of the stuff they took away. So we asked them, well, when can we give you that feedback? And they're like, have those meetings. That's great. That's what we really want to dive into when we officially get into the design phase. Okay. So once we can get to kind of a general, they're using this to kind of get us to the general shape. And I'll reference that again in a minute. So hopefully get that stuck in your head somewhere. So as you guys have questions for that, we have two options. You can put them into questions like I talked about earlier. One thing I chatted with Ron and Dan about is, do we want to have a joint work session time with staff so we can all brainstorm on program ideas together? Back to that key question of when's the appropriate time to be asking these questions. Mark and the design team think that, like, that's perfect for late winter, early spring. Of sped room should be bigger. Mm-hmm. Brian's office should be smaller. The only caveat to that, if there's something on there that you think would drastically or meaningfully influence kind of the shape of the building and that overall master plan, well, that's one you'd want to call out soon. And we've had some conversation, for example, around the art room. Different board members have brought this up with kind of two different solutions, but two questions to look at the art room in more detail. Could that kind of save some money? Do we really need to replace it? Could it save efficiency? Or could it even be used for some CTE space? I'm really trying hard not to repeat all the answers to y'all because I want to get it done more efficiently, but know that that art room is going to be thoroughly addressed next time the architects meet with you all. Like, that was some feedback we heard from you, and we'll get you that answer much better. Okay, before we talk more details on money, I've been yakking at you now for 20 something minutes. I probably got about the same amount of time left, but anything clarifying questions or otherwise before I dive a little deeper into the budget?
I would just like to say I appreciate that framing. For me, it makes a lot more sense in terms of a lot of the details that I'm considering and thinking about right now, and saying like that's the next phase is helpful for me to think about how do we make these decisions. And I also appreciate the idea of including us in these conversations with staff and admin to say this is what we're thinking as a board and also what you're thinking and how do we do this together. So I appreciate that. Thank you. That was very helpful for me.
Yeah, thanks, Carissa. Maybe now you can clap. No, I'm just kidding. Or maybe not. I meant your fake clap, not a real clap. All right, let's talk money. Again, interrupt me if you. Oh, all right, clicked away. Okay. All right. I am going to click on that button called budget in a minute, but this is a summary. I think I made a mistake, and it might have looked like I was hiding $5 million from you, and that's the kind of thing that superintendents go to jail for. So I want to make sure that I want to back up a little bit and make sure that you all recall everything that we did in August. Mm-hmm. So in August, we sold $49.3 million of general obligation bonds, and the sale could not have gone any better. And what does better mean? Well, one part of better we already knew. We got $6 million we never have to pay back. That's a grant from the state of Oregon. That's awesome. That gets us up to 55.3. Then this is the really awesome part. For details that I only understand maybe to a 9th grade level, investors are willing to spend more money on a bond than the note is actually worth, tax purposes and a bunch of things. So even though we only had to pay back the 49.3 plus interest, of course, we got an extra, actually it was almost $2.8 million. But boy, it costs a lot of money for all the people, the lawyers and everyone to sell these bonds. So we get about 2.3 million of that to spend basically on the project. The interest gets a little bit tricky. We should get about $2 million in interest over the next 3 years, but that's contingent on the next two things going right. One, we have to spend 80% of this money from 3 years from the time we sold the bonds. And we sold them as late as we could to get property taxes on the most recent bill that you all got. So I don't have the exact date. I could look it up, but it's somewhere around August. You got 3 years from August to spend 80% of the money, which the schedule allows for that. So we're on track. But if we go past that 3 years, if we don't spend 80% in 3 years, you have to start paying back some of the interest. And this is real. It happened. It happened to the Napa School District, though it's kind of a good problem to have because you have the money, but you do have to pay some of the interest back. And then the other one is it does depend on our cash flow needs. Though I'd have to get Jennifer and Piper to confirm this. If our cash flow needs become accelerated, like we need more money than we have on hand, because all this is tied up in investments right now, right? Mm-hmm. So we structured this for like a bunch of different levels of investments. Well, if one of those investments hasn't come all the way through yet, but we need the money right now, then we're going to have to kind of turn in that investment a little bit early. And of course, just like any of your home investments, you get a penalty for that. So that number 4 there, that $2 million is truly a little shaky on the exact amount, but let's call it for right now. We have about $59.6 million to spend. I need to share as loudly and transparently as possible. That is awesome news compared to the $49.3 million that we put up for the voters. Like that $10 million extra dollars is absolutely great news. I am gonna probably have some pessimistic things to say about the budget when I click on the details here. It's supposed to be that budget thing you see in the left corner. I'll fix that. I apologize. But right now, here's what we're doing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ron. Yeah, totally.
So Brian, also, I think would be important to understand where we landed on the 740. That was a number that was between a higher and a lower number, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. Thank you for asking that. So where that number first came from, I'll try to get this in less than 2 minutes, but that number first came from looking at a school. I somewhere in, well, I don't remember where, but looking at a school, a middle school that was recently built that was about the same size of the high school we had projected. It was done a year or two before we went out for this bond. And so we applied inflation, 6% inflation to the 3 years it took to get up to it, and then added 10% to that for be conservative. That was the first time we landed on 740. Now what we've done is looked at it from a different direction of what about schools that are being built right now? And it's really just about in the middle of what's being built right now. If you don't take into account, and I'm gonna say this with only knowledge that's publicly available because it's about another district. Portland Public's quite a bit higher right now. There's a recent Oregonian article about them that their cost per square foot would really scare you if they end up landing on them. But please know they have some policies around green type initiatives and around exactly the types of contractors you can hire. And some of those are starting to drive some costs up. So the long story short, that number's kind of about in the middle right now. I'm still optimistic and have told Cornerstone I expect us to beat that number when they do value engineering and competitive pricing. But for right now, that's a fair number to be used in everyone's opinion. Thanks, Ron. Okay. Why the heck aren't we spending all 59.6 million right now? That's a very, very wise question. One, it's a little bit tricky because we don't know the scope of the project yet, even though I just spent two slides telling you. Should we find a design, which all information is leading us to say it would be, the administrative building, holding onto that is more expensive than other projects. And if that's to go there may be other pieces that we have to cut out. And so to get an exact number, we have to know exactly what those pieces are. So there's just some uncertainty in scope right now of why not to push it all the way to 59.6. I'm going to show you in a minute, there are some of those bond promises that if you look at the line item of our budget, we don't have enough in there yet. Frankly, for the elementary school is not even close to enough money in there yet. And for the locker rooms, it is not likely that there's enough money in there for those, though we haven't got the number yet. Unidentified needs comes from like just I don't have a great way to describe this, but until we get that exact plan of exactly what we're doing, what could come up that maybe we need to put some money to. And then the wish list projects. So do we want to do any of those things on the wish list? We're not going to have any more than 59.6 million. That's the only thing I can promise you. So as we start understanding how much our requirements cost, do we want to be in a position where we can add some of those wish lists on? So with that, I am going to click into this document. Let me zoom it up a little bit. And I'm not going to read everything that says, please read first. I'm not going to read quite all to you, but I'll paraphrase. If you were to look at this with a magnifying glass, you'll probably find some rounding errors and some dollars that don't exactly align with other documents. I created this document and I pulled it from a number of different pieces. So just know that's not an oversight. It's just that not everything is coming from the same calculator. I just want to share that everybody knew the current bond we were doing was not going to meet the needs of the district. We had early estimates from around 2019 that there was a proposal to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of 120, 130, maybe even $150 million for a massive campus redo. How accurate that was, I have no idea. But we had really thought, the internal team felt that landing near that $3 per thousand was the limit that we were comfortable going towards. And that raised that, like you see there on line 3, up to 59.6 million, but we're only allocating 55.3 of, and I think I am going to elaborate on that a little now. Right now, we don't have anything allocated for owner's costs, and that's like things that we are spending money on right now out of our general fund that we probably could charge, and not probably, that most districts do choose to charge to the bond. We're not charging anything to the bond right now, any additional costs, like my salary, Dale's salary, probably not a lot of other things besides that now, but as they come up, we could see some general fund benefit from the bond. All districts that I know of do that. The one thing I'll say is we are out of that. What we are going to need to put into some owner's cost, we are going to need to hire someone, and I'm talking like a 3 to 5 hour a week to help with some of this communication, especially public facing communication. I would like to say we have the capacity to keep our website and social medias updated. We just are not finding the time to do so. And I really don't believe that efficiency could help with that. So that's just an example. It is a very, very small amount of money. But anyway, I think I talked the elementary school roof and HVAC and safety and security. They're not funded to what we would need. The roof and HVAC aren't funded right now to the need probably to be sufficient. Safety and security, we could probably get the bond promise to a minimal level with what we have, but boy, that's coming up a lot in the community now. And it may be a decision we make to add some to safety and security. Keeping the administrative building, all information that I'm getting is that will come at an additional cost and a need for additional contingencies. The Title IX upgrades right now, what we did is we took $500,000 out of the buffer from the high school and put it into a line specifically called locker rooms. You know, our construction people and our architects are fighting over how close that is to being a fair number. Our architects think they want more money. Our construction we're still working on it, but that one I've been told is likely not enough. But keep your eyes peeled on that one. We'll get more out of that soon. I think I talked to you already today. Long list of wish list items. These we've talked about, and they've risen to the top of our overall needs, but they don't have any money put towards them right now. So I think we talked about those. And then you'll see the $740 per square foot. Again, we will competitively price everything. We will go through a phase at the end of design to value engineer to make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck. Again, we have reason to believe it'll be lower than that. I can't share with you some of those numbers behind the scenes at PPS right now, but if you heard them, you'd be really scared right now. But I do not think we fit into that same category.
Before you move on, can I?
Oh, totally.
Okay. For one, the Title IX upgrades for the locker rooms, right? So doesn't Title IX say that the facilities have to be adequate for both genders?
Yeah, the idea would be essentially take the current footprint for both the locker rooms, think of it as a total gut job, equal size locker rooms on both sides, and a shared team room in the middle. Real common design right now in high schools, ends up getting a lot of extra stuff for some shared price, but it's a gut job when then everything will basically be equal.
Okay, that's what I was just gonna say, is that it's not an option to keep the boys' facilities and just upgrade the girls. It's got to be that'll be more economical to do both. Fair. Okay.
Yeah, I mean we could, but then we need to steal space from the boys is what has to happen to get them equal.
Okay, makes sense. And then the other one you were talking about, if you scroll, am I able to scroll or are you scrolling?
No, you can't scroll, but I will.
Okay, the like the line item number 5 or whatever, number 4, I guess. So having hiring someone to do communication and that kind of thing, I think that's awesome, and I think it's probably something we definitely need. And I wonder if there's additional support we can get for you too, because I keep thinking you are now this architect / builder, I call him Bob Builder because that was the cute little show that my son always watched, right? And all of these things are on top of the job of running a district for our students. So this is important, all of this very important, but also that main job of yours, I just feel like you have so much going on. Is it helpful if we get more than 3 or 4 hours and hire somebody that can also help? We don't have to answer that now, but also help with a lot of the responsibilities that this has added to your plate. Just want to throw that out there that as a board member personally, I would be happy to help fund this in terms of how we, allocate funds to make it so that you don't have this much on your plate? Because I know your plate is double what it was, I believe, anyway.
Thanks, Carissa. I do think, and I've tried to share this with quite a few of you. I don't think the current process is working in the most efficient way. The only thing I'll share is what I'd like to try first, and a lot of places do. A lot of school districts will hire a bond manager. A lot of times it's someone retired from facilities, work about half-time. I'll just share the two things that I've thought about right now is we are spending a lot of money on people we've already hired that are supposed to be representing us. And I think we can put more expectations on them to better meet your needs and my needs. So I'd like to try that first. And I am worried about our budget because I know we don't have enough money. And so anyway, I'll just land it with that, but I appreciate what you're saying. I think it needs to be something that it does. I don't want to just also squash it. I think we need to keep thinking about it.
Okay.
But thank you. I really do appreciate you thinking of that. I won't go into a ton of detail on this because I don't know how helpful it would be, but as you want to see it, and as you ponder it with maybe a little more time than we have, questions that you would come up, but you'll see a total budget of that 55.3 million here. And I'm going to point out two things. What's rows 17 and 18 or 3 and 4 on the kind of contents, the construction. The construction budget comes to 43,700,000. And that's in these major categories. And then if you break that $43 million down into the different kind of buckets, you'll see the high school, the aux gym, safety and security, the roof, the HVAC. As you'll notice, this hasn't been updated to take that money out of the high school and create a separate line for locker rooms, but it will be that internal discussions happened. And again, the big ones that I think are clearly underfunded is the BE, both things for BES, more the HVAC. This is more a Band-Aid. We tried to write a grant for replacement. It just didn't get funded. So this would be a Band-Aid to the elementary school HVAC. Boy, this is the minimum for that roof compared to an estimate we got a couple years ago. And then again, safety and security. So I'm going to go back to the slides just to keep us moving. Little bit about timeline. This will be quick. And I'll share, I absolutely hate this. All of them seem to use this. Oops, sorry, I was trying to, let me zoom a little. Oh, that's not zooming at all. Oh boy. Well, it zoomed everything but what you were looking at.
I can zoom in my own screen. I don't know if other people can.
Okay.
Yeah.
The details on this I can talk through anyway. It made me make a mental note to yourself to click through this. The big ones here, when you look at the auxiliary gym, the goal we have right now, and I'm going to talk to you about we're going to move into kind of master planning now in our discussion right now currently. So the pieces of this that are really contingent on master planning are the aux gym and the high school improvements. So that's these deals here in the middle. I have those arrows there to hopefully put your eyes at them. Oops, sorry about that. Trying to get rid of that 15. What it has for the aux gym is starting the design, which they have taking till summer, and then starting the actual construction on it fall of next school year. Okay. Having it be done the following summer. I will give you a little bit of a preview on our bond oversight committee, who is very well qualified. I encourage you to click into the roster of bond oversight committee people. This is what they do for work, most of them. I mean, not gyms, but they're in this world. They think all of our timelines are already pretty aggressive. So that's just the context. Me and Deb Mott, actually, I don't know if y'all know her, but she is on our bond oversight committee, and we were yelling at him that why is this taking so long? And to a T, every other committee member explained to us that this is probably an aggressive timeline. But it also has for the high school, starting the official design essentially now, right? Well, January, I guess. And that design takes about a year. And then there's a couple months of permitting, and then trying to have an opening of fall of 2027. Everything on the top of this is sort of procedural, preliminary, who are we hiring? And then we have master planning, and it's supposed to be ending in December with a vote in January. And then we have these other things down at the bottom. The circulation, that's just a placeholder. That's going to happen during the high school construction. If it exactly happens, we have them happening in these summers. I want to get married to that right now, but for the draft we're on. Safety and security and the other maintenance, we'd like to start that earlier. We think we should start that earlier. But again, the two big ones obviously are the Aux Gym and the high school. So I shared, by all accounts, people feel this is a tight timeline, especially as it relates to permitting, land use, that kind of stuff. Which, again, if anytime you need more details, make a note of it, and we'll get it in that written document. Dan and Ron talked to me a little bit about adjusting the timeline this morning, but they don't have the second bullet point, so this is new information to them as well. I did adjust the timeline, which I think might be a slide coming up. But if we can't make a decision on the master plan, which is the overall campus layout, not every little detail of the squares inside, but the shapes of what we're going to do in phase one, if we don't do it by February 1st, it'll delay the Aux Gym and possibly that fall 2027 high school opening. Of course, that's not a guarantee. That's not a crystal ball. That's what they believe based on the scheduling work they've done internally so far.
Brian, do you want questions along the way, or?
Why don't you go ahead and fire? Can I do this slide first?
Sure.
And then I'll take a pause. And I'm not sure. Hopefully I didn't skip over your question, but I think things, especially where we're at with kind of holidays right now, we're starting to feel a little bit rushed. And I'm going to show you some updated plans in a minute. So the idea of bringing those to a community meeting a week from tomorrow, it was thought that that's a little rushed. So the idea is to postpone that till early January, which it'll have to be the 7th, the 8th, or the 9th of January. Little TBD, but I'll land on a date with people. Really want you to have, during December 3rd also, as many of your written questions submitted that week as possible. Because on December 9th, we'll have some Q&A. You'll be able to get those questions answered. If not sooner in writing, but they'll be there to add even more context. Also on December 9th, you'll get the Bond Oversight Committee report. You have a draft in the agenda. I believe it's in your agenda today. I linked it somewhere. If it's not, I'll put it in the agenda today. A draft of their report and their recommendations at this point, or their understanding. You'll get summaries of the community feedback and the student feedback. And our associations have asked, and we said, sure, to give them a summary, and they would like to do a staff survey. So you have the results of those on December 9th. In addition, I think I might have skipped the work session. You'll have Q&A with the architect, general contractor, and our owner's rep. And then as I go down this slide a little bit, January 7th, 8th, or 9th, we'll have the community forum. The 13th, you'll see the final concepts and engage in some discussion. You don't need to answer this now, but many times when the board makes decisions, and this is across all public sectors, you ask for an actual recommendation from staff. I don't know if that's something you want formally. That's on concept 1 or 2. I think you should think about that as a board and discuss, and we can get to that. We have some time. But what we do need to do on this timeline is hold a special meeting the week of the 27th to the 30th. So you'd have, instead of putting the 13th to the next board meeting, you'd have the 13th till the end of January to make that call without influencing the timeline. And again, that's master plan, that shapes, but I think I don't want to not talk about the biggest piece of this will be the administrative building. That probably has the most. I can't think of anything that would be more unchangeable following that than the administrative building. Certainly that couldn't be more easily answered, certainly by January 13th. Okay, thanks for letting me pause you for a sec, Ron. I apologize if that was a bad idea, but let's take some questions.
And so if you go back a slide, Brian, I want to understand. So in that bullet where you said pushing the decision, that was information that you received from our consultants.
It is.
Part of that information, did they all, I'm assuming that was a Cornerstone or PNC?
Yes.
Cornerstone?
Cornerstone, yeah.
Okay. Did they also state alternatives to such as packages being released early, such as a a site development package where they're moving soil around, and then follow up with a structural package, and then follow up with a long lead package to get mechanical and electrical gear on order, followed up with the architectural package and the MEP package. Did those options get shared with you at that time when that statement was made?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Probably not to the detail you need. So what I'm going to say is let's make sure we get that question in writing. Let's make sure we get them to answer it sufficiently. What they were talking about, though, is the challenge is our concepts are pretty significantly different. And so to know what those things are, even, being that the two concepts are very significantly different, that it would be difficult to start on some things down that path. And I know I'm paraphrasing in some simple language. That's me paraphrasing what they said to me in simple language to try to get me to understand. So ultimately, I think that's a great question for you to type in, and when I show you how, I guess, or whatever. And let's make sure we get that question answered in the detail that you need. They talked about it to me, but I don't feel confident I can give you a very sufficient answer, other than, yes, they talked about that stuff. But thank you for that question. Let's talk master planning. Oh, sorry. Well, gotcha.
Clarify for me why, again, we are postponing the 12-3 community forum.
Yeah. So two things. Well, I don't know. Dan or Ron, would you like to answer that, or would you like me to try to summarize? I just don't want to speak for anybody.
So Dan, I can paraphrase if you
go ahead, Ron. Sorry.
So as we were preparing our work session, Will, this morning, it was brought up that there's enough questions that came out of our board meeting earlier this month that we wanted to make sure that we oversaw those two concepts before it got posted to the community. So given that this is our one and only opportunity before that meeting, that there was further dialogue that needed to take place with the consultants, and that so we know what's going to be presented to the community and not seeing it for the first time.
Okay, I need to see if I understand that, because I don't. Yeah, I don't. It sounds, I think you said that there was new information about something that came out recently that had an impact on the master plan, and so that needs to be digested? Or is it that you don't think the questions the board has asked have been answered or can be answered by then?
So what we talked about was whatever would be presented from on the December 3rd timeframe, the board would not have seen that prior to what's being presented. And from our board meeting, there were questions regarding various items that BRIC was working on. One of them being the difference of that 7,000 square feet on option 2, to see if Brick could get that closer to the 42,000 in concept 1. That's
So
just an
they
example of what was talked about.
so they can't have that back to us before December, but before a date before December 3, so the board can see it first.
That was my understanding.
And that's right. I got a little more information today. I have some preliminary stuff to show you, but anything that you would ask or need some big questions, and I know, Dan, I hope I'm not speaking out of place here, but I know Dan still has some questions around the art room and the aux gym. And so it was thought that, well, it was said that like today, also knowing that the holiday's there, today's kind of your last chance between now and, December 2nd to get much. So anything that I have today for you, it would be what would be presented to the community should it happen on the 3rd. And frankly, I told them, I got off the phone with Dan and Ron this morning right into that meeting, and I told them that we had to postpone it. So that was the direction y'all gave me, and that's what we acted on. So that can't be reversed at this point. And I'm not trying to be blunt. I'm not trying to be right, because we were going to spend this morning planning it, but instead we spent some time digging deeper into the new plans that not the new plans, but the answering of your questions. So at least I could have something for you today. But, now everyone's kind of scattered. I mean, I'm still around, but I'm not. Our consultants are scattered now for a couple days.
So you're saying that there are questions that have been answered by board members that have not been answered yet, or will not be able to be answered by December 3?
I think we'll know the answer to that at the end of today, but that was certainly actually, yes, Will, that is absolutely true. Yes. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have hesitated with that. Yes. I think more than I thought this morning will get answered tonight in the next 5 minutes or so, but there's going to be some that need some more clarification and details that I'm not able to provide. And we need to get some space and some time for those consultants to answer more clearly.
Can you give me just an idea of one of the more significant ones of those questions that have been asked, so I can understand what we're requiring of them to do?
Sure. And Dan or Ron, if you want to answer this instead, just interrupt me. But go ahead,
Yeah,
Ron. Totally.
So, Will, one of the questions that I saw in the documentation that we were provided was the art room. We're moving it from its current location, and we're moving it closer to the CTE building. The overall size of the art room is staying the same. So the question was, at $740, approximately 2,000 to 2,200 square feet, something like that. It's roughly about $1.5 to $1.7 million. We're moving the location from one location on the east side to move it on the west side. The next question that I asked was, what due diligence by the consultants, resulted in relocating it from point A to point B? It's not insignificant dollar amounts that we're discussing. So that was a question.
So who if I understand this right, so the architects gave us a graphic, an image, and the art room presented someplace that we didn't think was appropriate, and we wanted it somewhere else. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think in this case, it's actually a little more significant than that, because we've talked a lot about how that which room goes where is probably something we need to wait until the actual design. So like moving it inside of that new shape probably can wait. What Ron is more referring to, though, is if we left it where it is, like that would have an impact on the master plan. Not only money, but it'd have an impact on the shape of the building, what you can do with that space in 20 years, all that stuff. And so that's why it's a master plan discussion, not a design discussion. If we were just talking about moving it from one side of the hall to the other, I think everyone would say you need to wait on that for a couple more months.
I guess I'm just keying on the December 3 thing, not because it's that critical necessarily, but I'm going clear back to the first statement you made that our contractors don't think we trust them. And my concern here is that I believe that the board is taking too big of a role in micromanaging our contractors for some reason. We went through the most critical steps of this process first, which was hiring the owner's rep, which we put due diligence in, and we did research on them, and we decided we were going to trust them. Or if we didn't, we should have talked about it more. We then hired an architecture firm through the same process that we agreed we were going to trust. Then we hired a contractor through the same process. And now it seems when they bring us things, we want our questions to them aren't along the lines of that we want something different, although sometimes they are, but they're often along the lines of challenging or questioning what they're recommending. And I don't think that's appropriate for the board to do. If there are fundamental things that the board is concerned about, I think the people who are going to be using those, like the staff and those who are going to be actively involved in using this school, have more say or should be asked if that's a concern or not before the board interjects. I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot, and we're getting in our own way because we've gone to the effort of hiring experts, and we're not just asking questions to try different options. We're challenging their credibility, and we're trying to make decisions at the board level that we don't have any business making because we're not using the school. And these two, and it seems like we continue to keep analyzing these because of board questions. And if the board questions are just a matter of understanding, I understand that. And if they raise a fundamental question about usability that we can't get satisfied, I understand that. But if we are unwilling to trust the contractors that we are paying and that we have hired, we need to stop and go back and redo that. So we're not going to get through this process by micromanaging our contractors. So when I see these delays and you talk about pushing back the timeline for the school, all I see is we're putting them in untenable positions where they cannot move forward with practical common sense decisions because we are unwilling to accept the conclusions, the dollars, the estimates, the layouts that they've designed. We don't want to approve those, so we keep confounding their progress. And that's what I'm seeing step by step. And I think that's the wrong role for the board. I think it's self-defeating, and I think it's going to screw up the bond. And it's not going to provide what we should provide to the community. So I'm trying to understand, every time I hear this, we're delaying it. And it's to get more information. All the stuff you've gone through so far today, I've known this from the beginning because I listened to it the first time you said it. And I read the papers when you gave it to us. And I asked questions when I didn't understand it. And granted, I was in the meetings for a while, which helped. But I don't understand why we keep challenging over and over the experts that we've selected. And I don't see how we're going to make progress if we continue to do that. So I don't understand why we can't make some decisions on some of these things that are big picture decisions to move the project forward instead of continuing to confound our contractors.
Yeah, thanks, Will. And I think Ron and Dan and I had a nice talk on Friday, and I think I expressed a little bit of my frustration and how I wish I could have done a better job of setting us up for some success as we go along. I'm going to suggest for a minute, maybe y'all can just sort of think about that for a minute internally. And I really want to show you the last kind of set of things on the master plan, because I do see that as a very significant milestone that, again, needs to happen by February 1st. And so let me show you the couple of things. And I think this first, let me click back over. I apologize for that. Let me click over. When we talk about the master plan, I think I put both copies in here, but it doesn't matter. This is what we're talking about on February 1st. And now there's some problems with it, and it's either one with or without the central office. This one's first, the central office one's second. I'm not trying to do anything with this, but remind you of the level of detail that you are being asked about. What will be different about this that'll be presented to you is more clear what happens over the next 3 years and what's a 20-year plan. That will be more visually clear to you. To give Mark a little bit of grace, he spent so much time on this. I think it's just obvious to him. It's not obvious to me or anyone else, so that will be more clear. The real big pieces here are location change to the Ox Gym, which there's a lot we could talk about now, but we don't have time. The shape of this building, and not that it can't still change some after the master plan, right? But the big idea of this, obviously, is the central office there or not. I think that's probably what's really slowing things down the most. There was some talk about the art room that I think will be well discussed. Boy, we all wish we could get rid of this CTE thing. A little bit to Will's point, there's not been one of our consultants that thinks that's remotely close to within our budget right now. But that's been another pressure point. Everything happening kind of over here will happen in 20 years. You know what I mean? Next bond kind of stuff, maybe 15 years, whatever. So I didn't want to show you this to give you much more detail on it, because I want you to ask the specific questions you're not getting answers to. But this is the level of detail that we're talking about asking you to do, especially as it relates to phase 1 of the plan, which again will be much more clear in a future version of this. Different colors, borderlines. But the biggest project is the high school. And the shape of the high school is dependent on the central office building. So I got 2 more slides for you. 3 more slides, sorry. This is what was shown to you at the last board meeting. You had some questions around can you see my cursor when I'm circling? Okay, good. Well, some questions around here. This seems like a lot of open space. And is that a good idea? Is it even maybe a good idea that we can't afford? Let's talk about that. There was some talk about some of this area here, and was it to scale? And some of the questions you asked were captured that you can see here. We had obviously much more discussion around that. Okay, but more importantly, I think this was presented as kind of what you can do as a baseline budget. So this would be the general concept going forward. Again, presented to bond oversight committee, presented to students, will be presented to faculty. You also saw this one. The big difference here was it had the central office still here, but the goal was to keep it apples to apples, so have mostly as close of the same everything else as we can. And you had some questions with this that you, as you see written here, and some other questions, including, can you make it less over budget? Again, I know I'm paraphrasing your question for you. And another big one was, well, it sort of seems like you're not really keeping the theme of the district office. It's going to be totally different. You're filling in one of the best parts, which is that hole in the center. So I went back to them and I said, we got to answer all their questions. And I said, you come up with what you think is absolutely the best use of that district office building that we can utilize as part of the new school. Honestly, I felt I'd give them, they had felt torn in a couple different directions, but I said, I don't care if you don't listen to one thing I've said. Tell us what you think is best with that building, with everything you've heard so far. So then they came up with this. This keeps the district office where it is, the building, okay? It makes a high school now that looks a lot like our current high school. The sort of, if you walk inside, of course it'll be new, that's great, but it doesn't have the open space. I think that's probably the biggest difference. Floor 1, floor 2. It leaves the hole in the district office. aesthetically, that seemed to be pretty powerful. It has the media center, a larger classroom still there. That's the bottom floor. And then the top floor becomes the district office in 2 wings. Totally be usable by us. Hole in the center still. With this design, as it is, the ROM isn't written on here, okay? But it does keep the district office. It keeps the aesthetic similar, right? Does get rid of half the windows. Got an engineering email I can forward out to you. Miller and the new civil engineer agree. Gets rid of half the windows. Keeping more than half the windows would get more expensive, which we could price out, but doesn't include here. This still gets 4,500 square feet more than this one, which was the first one you saw. About 4,500. I don't have the number written here. Okay. Which, again, when you math it out, PNC has not done the rough order of magnitude increase that this would cost. But if you just take the same ratios that they presented to you last time, I did out that math, and it gets to 4 to 6 million, which again is that number keeps coming up as the minimum amount difference. Like Mark was able to get this to me kind of the 11th hour kind of thing. I'm not going to be able to answer your minute details on this, but I am going to encourage you. I'll probably just wrap what I have now, and then we can just do Q&A. And then again, I have to step out at 5:30. You all can stay if you like. Whatever you want, but I have to step out at 5:30. What would you like to talk about more tonight as time allows? But then this link, which I am going to put into the chat and you have emailed. This is a way to get if you can type your questions out in as much detail as you can on anything we talked about tonight or frankly otherwise. Move this out of the way, sorry. We will review the questions weekly, assign a team member to answer them. You'll see the written FAQ, and we're going to get a public facing it, trying to get a public and a private, or nothing's private, a public and an internal FAQ. But that's where, like you said, I don't have the time, the skills. It's physically impossible to repeat the 50 to 75 hours worth of stuff to you. So if you can do it in writing, then they have the way to give you a concise answer. And I think that's something we've been missing.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'll say about this one, I'm sorry, I should have said this before. The only thing I don't like about, this gets into would you rather be at Aloha High School or Mountainside High School? And that's a tough one. This is the same vibe, but brand new, is ours. This shrinking of this hallway, like right here, you can do on this one as well. So this does take you a little bit away from your apples to apples. Not exactly the same. I know I'm speaking to an architect and others in here, but we could tell them to do this for the whole design as well. But this is what I'm telling you is proposed concept 2 alternative. What this is labeled at is their best thinking to date, focusing on how to best utilize this, understanding the costs included with connecting them that would keep the central office versus proposed concept 1, which this is what they recommend for not only cost, but final product. So we have about 15 minutes. I maybe be a little flexible, but thank you for letting me go. I know I usually, like almost always,
So just
pack a
one
lot
question
in.
first, and I'll shut up if I have to after that. From all of this, please, any board member who feels differently, tell me. It appears to me like everything that we're doing is moving forward, with the exception that it's being held back because of the decision on the admin building. And so to me, everything you said here makes the decision of the admin building the elephant in this room. Please tell me if I'm wrong about that, if anybody differs about that. This decision is what's everything is hinging on. Am I wrong? Please tell me if I'm wrong about that.
I think there's another one. I think the position of the auxiliary gym is still kind of questionable in my mind. And I have specific reasons why I think it shouldn't be attached to the middle school. But we can talk about those or not. I mean, it's up to you.
Would
And
that
I
have
do have a
anything-
general question under the 11 bus parking in the middle there. Is that included in phase one? Or is that the 20-year plan?
Yes, it's included in there. Lebeth just gave them feedback on those exact 12 parking stalls there, so I know he is adjusting that some. Again, not having the parking spaces so close. Again, a little to give them a little credit, and to Will's point, some of what happens on phase one is dependent on if we spend money on the central office or not. I haven't seen a proposal of that getting to zero. So if we're going to keep it, we got to plan on spending that money, which at least until it's done and you know how much it costs, could influence some of that. But as of today, he told me that is getting into phase one. But that will be clear to you by the next time you see one of these maps, what is and isn't in phase one. I'm even hesitate to answer that, but that's what he said today.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would like to add, I agree with Dan about the position of the Ox Gym, right? And then I'm looking at this with the bus parking and I'm thinking, wow, that's gonna piss off all of youth sports if they don't have any places to practice. So Will, to kind of answer your question, I think the admin is a huge question that I wish we had been talking about for like months before the bond even, right? But I think there are other pieces where there's, at least I can speak from my perspective, which was tonight was very helpful. Every time we have had these sessions, I feel way more like I'm understanding so much more. And I think, Will, you've been involved in this for a really long time, so you have a different like baseline knowledge and then ability to grow that. And for me, it's like this is all new. And I feel like there's so many moving parts. I know we're not going to make everyone happy. I realize that. But I feel like this is a huge decision that we have to make as a board. And so I know it feels like we're slowing it down, but for me, that's helpful because I need to understand what I'm voting on. And when we make that statement, like you're right, that I agree with you that the staff is using the building, admin is using the building, students are using the building, but we are ultimately responsible for making the decisions of what this is going to be. And so that's where I feel like I don't feel like we're micromanaging. Maybe it feels like that to other people, but I just need to understand the scope and like what are we doing and what are we being asked to vote on? And if I'm going to get blowback from every single person in this community that I know, we need to at least know why I voted the way I did and how that's all like how it's all fitting together. I realize it is a massive puzzle and it's really confusing. And so for me, just at least understanding the pieces that I can speak to is really important. And this even just tonight has really helped me to do that. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that there's a lot of moving parts and people that are affected by all of this, right? So that's my thinking.
I apologize if I sounded like this was not worthwhile. I totally agree with you. I think this was very, very helpful, and I would not want to not hear this information. My problem is I just can't figure it out in terms of the admin building, because I believe that everybody on the board, please tell me if I'm wrong, I believe everybody on the board has realized from all this information that no matter what choice we make on the admin building, it's going to cost us a minimum of $4 million more.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of how badly we'd like to keep the building, and I would love to keep the building, to me, that takes it off the table as a practical option. I do agree we should do the exploration and that we should show the community art analysis, and I think we've done that. But I still think it's confounding, and it's taking up time and process and detail to work on things like the Ox Gym and the art room and everything else because of this decision that to me doesn't even, it's again, having done the due diligence for the community and knowing and finally getting to the facts, knowing what it is, it just seems to me like it's a piece that could be removed from the process once and for all with full explanation, and it makes full financial sense, it makes full responsible sense, and it removes it from all of the confusion that we're trying to bring to pass. Is that am I please tell me where I'm wrong about that. Am I wrong about the dollars that it's over, so that we do need to keep looking at that? Am I
Well,
wrong that if we make a choice now, the committee is going to think we didn't look at it? Am I wrong about that because we do want to spend that much money potentially to keep it? Please help me understand this choice that seems so clearly obvious right now, and a feeling that most of us actually agree with that, why we can't remove it from all of the complicated calculations.
well, one of the things that I mentioned in October was the backup to understand when I asked the question about due diligence on the administration building, and Brick came back with that memo, and their structural engineer came back with asking to open up, holes in the building to verify what was there. And I asked for backup of that. What was listed in the memo to us was approximately $40,000. And when I asked for the backup, which was the breakdown of what made up that $40,000, one, their estimate right at the top was off by $500. There's something was not adding up right. But then they had additional openings, part of that, just in case the structural engineer asked for more openings. They had patching and repairing of the openings that they were creating. They had additional patching and repairing of irrigation around the building in case they hit anything. They had cost estimating on something from PNC. That part was, we're paying them over, I think, I don't know, $60,000, $90,000 for their pre-construction work. There was a number of things there that I sent to Brian asking questions about, because that approximate $40,000 was actually less than 20. So, to questions about what the prices that we're getting, I would like to actually understand, that
what
information.
What I hear you saying, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding, it's been posited that the extra expense for this building would be at least $4 million. And so in asking the questions you are asking, and we remove $40,000 from the $4 million, that still leaves $6,960,000 difference.
Yeah.
Are you inferring that because of those inaccuracies, that $4 million actually could be less?
What I'm trying to understand is, when they're putting a premium cost on this, what assumptions are being added to that premium cost? And based off of that, to get a better understanding of where the risks are at. If you recall, when we were going through the proposals by Cornerstone, one of the proposals that Cornerstone had in there was, if they had opened up walls prior to design, they would have had a better design because they would have understood what was actually taking place. So a little bit of money up front would have actually saved them. That was based off of their experience.
So I have the same question, Ron. Tell me, it's a yes or no question. Are you saying that you believe that the $4 million lump sum that they've said is minimum is potentially not accurate?
That's correct. I do.
Okay. What do you think it could be reduced by if they were to pursue all the things that you are asking?
That's the part that I'm not sure about.
Do you think it
One
could
of
be
the well, so Will, I'll share with you what I shared with Brian. What I heard in our November board meeting, the premium cost to renovate from PNC, the administration building, was anywhere from $850 to $925 a square foot. The overall budget cost that we have is $740. So when I do the math on that, and I can just do that real here since I'm on a computer. So one of the things that we need to understand and should be knowable is the overall square footage of the existing administration building. I believe that to be 10,800 square feet. If you know that is the different, I'm open to that. But basically at the low end at $850 minus $740 is $110 difference. If you times that by the 10,800 square feet, that breaks down to $1,188,000. If you basically double that to, approximately double that to the 950, it takes it just under $2 million.
So
basically.
okay, so call it whatever you want to call it. This is my concern. We are not a board that has to make decisions by consensus. We are a board by vote. You, Ron, are entitled to ask whatever questions you want and get whatever answers you want. So am I, so is Carissa, so is Dan, everybody else. What I'm hearing is that you are one board member with questions that frankly I believe are beyond realistic, and they actually contradict the knowledge that I actually have. I know you feel like this as an architect. I know it as a contractor. I feel like your questions because are going beyond what's necessary, and we have 4 other board members who may or may not have those questions or believe that they are worth asking. And if that's the case, then one board member, because of their insistence on what I believe are unrealistic questions, is stopping the process. And as much as I don't like, I'm not disregarding the credibility of any Ron or anybody, in a practical matter, there is other knowledge on this than yours. And there is other understanding, and there are other costs that are being considered beyond what you're asking about. And I think, and if the rest of the board members don't have an understanding of what those are, I think we should answer those questions. But it's my perception that the other 4 board members are comfortable that, not discounting that there may be some differences in what you say, that the difference could not be made small enough to support continuing to labor process with that. And I'd like to have it, if we try to vote, that didn't work. I'd like to at least hear a consensus of that. And if I'm right about the consensus, can we just take some action and simplify this whole process on a very practical decision?
The only thing I'm going to chat about here, Will, and I really do appreciate, I think it's very healthy for y'all to be talking about this. This is complicated, it's complex. When we took action that wasn't planned last time, that definitely sent us down a path that was not productive for many board members. I did look back at our agreements, and it does say that if at all possible, action will be put on the agenda ahead of time. So I don't feel it would be wise for y'all to take action tonight. Ron, I think, and I apologize, but as you know, I'd started this saying I have a pretty hard stop at 5:30.
Yeah.
I don't need
to
hit close now, but I think, Will, I'm not trying to, your comments are very much the challenges I'm having in getting the correct information to board members. It does have to do with why I asked if you all would like a recommendation from staff on some of these things. I'm not sure the best way to proceed in the immediate to Will's comments outside of the timeline that I showed earlier.
Well, and I get that the timeline isn't really the main point. And I know I can't ask for a vote. It's not been scheduled. I guess what I'm just asking is maybe for a consensus poll. And for those who still have questions, if there are still a majority that have questions, then those should be answered. But it seems I'd just like to know, are the 4 of us holding back because of one board member? And
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I want to throw that out there. And Brian, I want to honor your time. And I wonder, are we allowed to just keep talking for a few more minutes if Molly stays with us? Molly, I don't want to keep you later either, but I would love to hear people's thoughts on this, because this is the big question. But Will, just to ease your mind, I'm not personally, I just don't feel comfortable making this huge decision yet. And then there's a lot of variables, right? Like we had the historical society, we've got people that are very upset about possibly losing a piece of our history, and then you've got all these people that are so upset about the future of banks and these big developments. Like there's a lot of influences, I believe, right? And then we also have a board election coming up in May, which is going to be 3 of us. So there's lots of things to consider, which is why I don't like the idea of rushing these decisions. And I personally am comfortable with this timeline of really thinking through it and digesting it. I don't feel like we as a board ever have time to sit down and actually have this conversation, which we can't have because I know Brian's got to go. But I wonder if we could just, like you said, just take a minute to think about where we're all at with this and then move from there. Is that possible? And does that work for people? I don't know. Maybe not.
It would be more helpful for me to be here. So is there any way you can have that in 8 minutes and do a whip around if you think it's there? And the only thing I'll reach back to, this probably the last thing I say tonight, besides thank you, is please put your questions in writing to the level of detail that you feel you need.
Okay.
In that link that I sent to you in the chat, I'll follow up with an email. But Ron and Dan, if you guys want to have a whip around real fast on how you would like to respond to that, we can try and have it done by 5:40 because it would help me to hear.
I just want to clarify the nature of my question, Chris. I don't disagree with you. That's what I'm trying to understand is what else it is that you would like to know that would help you get closer to a choice. That's what I'm trying to understand. I'm not trying to truncate anything.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I'm just trying to find a path that takes us one way or the other.
Yeah, I hear you. Leslie, what are you thinking?
Well, much like you, Carissa, I know that our community it's flowing out there, and I'm hearing things that they're upset that we're even thinking of taking down the district office, had been building. But I think it could be done if they think they have a say in it. They're the ones that voted this bond in the first place. Now, I never even thought about the district office building when we put the bond in. I just wanted a better place for our kids. That's it. But I think we have to take into consideration, yes, Will, there's 3 of us. 3 of us that are going to be running. There are a lot of voters out there. And
I'm not discounting that. I'm just trying to understand what else we can do I don't understand what the key thing that is the deciding point is going to happen. I don't understand what, we put it off for a week and we're going to know more. What more are we going to know? Another week? I just want to understand what else, what is the deciding factor? What do we need to know?
Tonight was good because I was really able to get things kind of down so that when people ask me, I feel better informed. So I know it's a toughie, alrighty.
I don't know how we can direct Brian or our contractors to research more unless we ask them what to do. And I know Ron's asked for some things.
Well, hold on. Let's have Ron and Dan share too, because I know Brian's got to go. We got 5 minutes.
To be honest with you, I understand, and I actually have heard some people talking in the community about, it's the same as the house that we just knocked down. Like the community wasn't really taking whatever. To me, I'm more concerned about the layout. And I have some questions about the layout that I'm going to put in the chat. And it has to do with probably the Ox Gym for the most part. I don't understand why we're taking down the barn and not replacing it with a functional space. But we will take away field space for T-ball, we'll take away field space for football. So those spaces get used at least 6 months to 8 months out of the year. And I have a problem with losing space like that on this campus. So to me, it's more about that. It's more about flow, potentially losing those parking spaces back there and the access to those parking spaces. So, and I know part of that was I didn't understand the phasing for the new bus parking? And do we want to spend money there, or do we want to spend money like, making a better high school? Those are the questions that I'm grappling with.
And I'm not suggesting we adopt a master plan. I'm not talking about the admin building. I don't understand how the Ox choices bear on the admin building decision. What is the connection there?
The only thing that Brian said earlier was that we need to decide on that because they need to move forward with the design and in order to stay on track. Was what I was hearing in the first few slides.
Because it does affect, right? Like if it affects where we put that gym and how that all works. So I think it's just a big puzzle.
One thing I think I hope people heard was that the advocates for keeping the admin building are not interested in the way we're proposing to keep it.
I think that's a good point, Will.
I think
That
that's
is my
the point.
concern.
That-
That
You're
I was gonna
right,
say
Will.
that is a big concern because that I think that helps to reframe this in that if we're going to use it with this bond money, it needs to be to do the things we promised with the bond promise. We did not promise to rehabilitate an old building and use it for community purposes. And I really feel like the last board meeting we had where everyone presented made that clear to me. And as you've been asking, like, what's the number? Is it 6 million, 5 million, whatever it is? In my understanding, for our uses, we are not going to be able to satisfy what they want it to be. It's not going to, we can't refurbish a building. We can't.
To restore it would be
Yeah.
significantly more than what we're talking about.
But it took me some time to understand what they wanted. It's not just keep the building. That's not what people are asking for. Don't just keep the building, it's keep the building as it is.
Right.
And that's a whole different thing. And that's a whole different thing. So that is helping me to see what we need to do here. But those are those sticking points, and there's several.
And Brian, I want to get you out here. Sorry, Will, but you got 2 minutes, right? Brian, was it 5:40?
All I need you to do is adjourn.
Okay. So everyone, we have that link for questions to write them out. I think I know we could talk about this for a lot longer, but I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Brian, for setting this up and for the presentation. And then we have that link to write out your written questions.
And I'll try to do a little summary email to you tomorrow.
I want to thank you for
Okay.
indulging my questions, everybody.
Thank you. And
It-
Brian, please thank your wife for giving us an extra 10 minutes with you. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I'm sure
Molly,
the
for your
max is
extra 10
comfy.
minutes. We appreciate you.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Good night.
All right.